Hello, everybody. Welcome to GM Joel's Chess Week Recap on ICC. We've got the action from Tata Steel covered in our live recap videos. We have a rest day at the Tata Steel on Monday, and Yermo is bringing you the action from round 6 through 8, where we now have a three-way tie. And I'll be doing a recap video later in the week. But meanwhile, give us a chance to talk about other things going on in the world. And this week I'm going to focus on a couple of other stories that may not be getting so much attention in the chess media, but kind of some feel-good chess stories, which involves 2 tournaments, 2 continents, and 2 Grandmaster titles. First, I'm very pleased to report that a student of mine, John Michael Burke of New Jersey, has earned his 3rd Grandmaster norm in the Charlotte Chess Club Winter International. Coupled with a FIDE rating already comfortably over 2,500, Burke's title will be officially ratified at the next FIDE Presidential Board meeting. John's score of 6.5 out of 9 was also good enough for equal first place with Dennis Kadrich. Winning all 4 white games in the first 6 rounds powered this strong result for John. I first met him at the World Youth in Brazil in 2011. I found out he was from, my state of New Jersey. I had never heard of him, but I figured, okay, it'd be nice to coach him for the tournament. And I guess he was about 9 years old at the time. And he showed me his first round game, which he actually lost, but I was just amazed at all the variations he was showing me because, I don't always see that. I say, well, why did you play that move? And often kids say, I don't know. But he was working out so much, I thought this kid is going to go places. And he has. Now he's 16 and an especially formidable attacking player. I'm going to showcase 2 wins from that tournament that really show his fearless approach. First came out of the gate in the first round against a slightly older teenager, Bryce Tiglon. Tiglon is from the northwest of the country. So Burke, he's changed some of his openings recently. I don't know if threw some people off, but okay, we have a winner, and which is already kind of taking a risk. It's a very sharp opening, and Bishop A5 is one with not a great reputation. So it's an interesting choice against John. Usually people want to play it a little bit more carefully. So B4, this is the standard problem with this opening for many years. If black takes, then white goes knight B5, and that knight is targeting this weak D6 square. So black generally answers C takes D4, and now this move Queen G4 is pretty strong. So King F8 defends the pawn, but now white is going to take back the pawn on D4, and he's forced the black king to move. So now it goes along theoretical lines for a while. This part is all known. And now we get the first new move of the game. Knight takes D4. There was a Grandmaster game between Inorkiev and Vallejo Pons from Palma de Mallorca just last year, where white took with the knight. Took with the bishop. Of course, knight takes was in this game, and bishop takes, king f7, castles, bishop d7. So white has this, is holding this d4 point, but black is keeping everything together as long as he just leaves that pawn on f6, and so he traded bishops, and okay, the position was more or less equal. So John tries knight takes d4, and he's immediately rewarded for this new move, and I I don't know how much of this. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about this game, so I don't know how much of this he had prepared. But he's rewarded now when Tigon makes a serious mistake. He sees the pawn on g6 attacked, and he goes and defends it. But he needed to play one of two moves. Queen c7 is okay in this position, and the thing is, if white just comes back knight f3, bring the knight back to f3 to defend, then it's not going to be so good for him. Some interesting possibilities. F4, black just plays king f7, holds things. C4 is an interesting move here, and we could have this variation, c4 takes knight f3, e4, knight e5, rook h5. That's not always moves for us, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of an equal game, very sharp. Yeah, queen c7, and white, he doesn't want to take on f7 and trade queens. Even if he wins a pawn, it might not be, that great, especially if he has to give black, a lot of pawns in the center. Also, another slightly simpler move, but a move that looks like you can't really play, bishop d7. But it's better to give this pawn on g6 and then come back, because let's say something like queen g3, black can pin with queen c7, and again, he's okay despite losing that pawn. It's not really that important. Or queen g4, trying to avoid a trade of queens, black can play f5 and queen h4, and it seems to have sufficient compensation for pawn. All this is not that obvious, but after the move king f7, now knight b5, and that comes to d6. Black is in a whole lot of trouble after that. All right, so he goes g5, and a very interesting move, castles queenside. White can go either way on this. He can also keep the king on the king side, which is a little bit safer, although then you don't get the push with h4. C4 would fit in with that plan, and arguably give an even larger advantage. But castles is still pretty dangerous for black. Bishop c7, which perhaps black could have considered rook h4, and maybe that would have been a good idea to prevent h4. But also bishop c7 allows interesting tactic. I don't know if John saw this or not. You can take the bishop and play rook takes d5, because pawn takes runs into e6. And it's good to clear out that d5 pawn, because black is really just not going to be quick enough to get pieces out and defend. If bishop d7, rook c5 is good, but also tactical move e takes f6, because if black takes the queen, then there's a rook takes d7 intermezzo. So that would be very strong, straightforward continuation. But John plays in a more attacking vein, h4, bishop d7 takes, and then g takes h4. He could have actually taken the pawn on g5 right away to avoid that in-between move. And the funny thing is about that, he doesn't need to take the bishop. He can give the knight, and then g6 check, and if let's say king e7, rook takes h8, queen takes. The problem is now the bishop on c7 is hanging. Black could try to avoid that problem by taking on h1, but he's going to run into the same kind of problem. Maybe G6, start with G6, take, rook H7. White's attack is overwhelming. So, okay, maybe John didn't play the most accurately at this part of the game. It's very complicated. I'd say, my games are like that too. G takes H4 kept Black a little more in the game, but it's still a very unpleasant position. G6, it was probably better to play G5, which gives Black this possibility of Queen F4 check to try to trade queens. So I think that would have been kind of picking up some time, more useful than G6, which was effectively met by Rook D4, attacking the pawn. C8, Queen E2. And Black is trying to fish for some counterplay on the queen side, but it's falling apart quickly on the other side. So Bishop B5 gets out of the way. Key is not to trade queens. He gives the pawn. He's not all that concerned necessarily about material because he's got a big initiative. And now he does some switching back and forth. He creates the threat to come in, and then the queen comes to H6. Now, he has to take back with the bishop to keep the queen in there, and then king takes F6. Black gets rid of that pawn. So it's not completely over. So queen H check. Now the king goes back, bishop H6, and queen G7 or queen F8 is coming. Black can't allow that, so he has to play king F5. And now he takes the pawn at H4. So we've got a position where the material is even. All right, there's a threat of queen F4, but the problem is the black king is in a lot of trouble. There's a threat of queen F4 mate, queen G5 mate, so queen G7 is forced. Bishop B2, E5. Now he plays F4. So black is in a lot of trouble. He's under a lot of pressure. But the huge threat of queen G5, he needed to move the bishop. But it's still a game after bishop E8 because the bishop is opposite colors. Means that it's not just a trivial matter for white to be at material. Queen F2. And I think that black would probably have to play some accurate moves like queen G4. And if F takes E5 check, queen F4. And this seems to be the only way to stay in the game, but still not necessarily easily winning for white. So after F4, Tigran went very wrong with D4, and now he's busted after queen G5 check, and he has to go. If he goes king E6, F5 wins the picks up the bishop, but this move wins anyway. I'm suspecting there could have been some time pressure there. Tigran tried D3, and now the move F6 certainly would win pretty cleanly, as it not only attacks the queen but threatens mate in one. Always good to threaten mate in one. But I think John just decided just take the bishop because it's a reasonable position either way. Black can't. It's just a piece down, can't do anything. So that's how the game ended. So a very sharp game. Always looks easy on the computer. So, I could have played that game better than John if I had my computer with me. But normally, until I look at the computer, I can't tell what's going on. His games are always super complicated. In the fifth round, he knocked off a contemporary of mine, Colombian Grandmaster Alonso Zapata. I played many times back in the day. Burke's play in this game is a bit speculative, but Zapata is not able to meet the pressure of finding lots of accurate defensive moves. Okay, so let's have a look at that game next. Okay, so E4, and we get a Sicilian. Now this, Paul's in Arcan is very it's been a popular opening over the last several years, and there's a attacking formation I like very much for white, with or without c4. I think white can play pretty much the same way. But this is interesting, because I'm sure that this has popped up in lessons before, because I'm very fond of this setup. First, put the king in the corner to get off of that diagonal, kill the tactics, and then bishop d2 and rook ae1, and it's all setting up e5. I think it's a very nice attacking formation for white. There are various things black can try, but I think it's very pleasant. It's one of the rare opportunities that I can really offer useful advice to John in the opening, because he knows them as well, or is better than I do. But it's interesting, he does not go with my way of doing these things, and I don't know if he just thought it better or what, but he played bishop e3, and then rook e8. Usually black goes straight for b6, but when white does put the bishop on e3, in most of those games, white has put the rook on c1 to play more Moroczky bind type of thing, just clamping down. But he plays it also for e5, but it takes a few more moves to get it organized, because he has to now stick the bishop on g1, and perhaps he feels that the bishop on g1 is very useful for the attack, and it's worth an extra tempo to put it there. One downside is that sometimes the black knight can come to h5, maybe here, and can sometimes take on f4 with e5 coming up, but it's not so easy to arrange that. All right, so he repositions the bishop, and then e5. Okay, that's the thing about Johnny's a pretty straight-ahead player. He's very, very aggressive, very fearless, and here we go, e5. Now, he goes knight h5. If he takes and plays knight h5, then white can play g4, and it's possible for black to sacrifice a piece here. Takes, and he could take off the bishop and play b6. Might be some practical chances in this, but there's still some weaknesses of the dark squares, and it seems that white has the better chances, although I think really anything can happen here. I might have been tempted to do it. But he goes knight h5, takes on d6, and knight e4. Queen goes back. Maybe in hindsight, it might have considered protecting the rook. No, f5. So that's really part of John's idea, is that this rook on e8 is hanging in some tactics. Takes, pawn takes, and now he takes on f5. Again, I haven't talked to him about this game. He might have been planning this move, queen takes h5, at least at some point along the way. But it runs into rook takes e4, and if bishop takes e4, knight f6, and that's a killing fork. Black is just winning. So he has to go sacrificial mode. Rook takes f5. So I don't know if he planned all this, but it's not that easy to deal with. And Zapata doesn't take best advantage of it. The strongest move is knight e5. It's not that easy to play necessarily. Rook takes h5 would be met by bishop g4. That's a strong move. And queen takes h5. Black can take the rook and take the bishop, hanging bishop on d3, and that really defends everything. So after knight e5, rook g5 looks best, but still should be good for black. Not with knight f4, because that runs into knight f6 check. And let's say if king h8, rook takes g7, this is a very nice resource, threatens the mate in one, and if king takes rook, knight takes e8 is a big fork, and the knight just takes everything. If the king goes the other way to avoid that mate, well, I'd first lop off that h-pawn, king f8, and now I think rook g7 anyway. Knight takes queen, rook g8, king e7, and now knight fork, and king goes over, and now white takes the rook. Sometimes you want to take the thing that's going to take you, and white just accumulates an enormous number of pieces for the queen and is winning. So we back that up. Actually, restart that. 95, rook g5. But then best is h6. And if h6, what to do there? Rook g7, king g7, queen h5, bishop g4. This is a strong move. Bishop g4. And queen h4, queen d8. That's the key. So white doesn't get to maintain the attack. He has to trade or give up more material, and white is going to be down in exchange. Like, all that kind of stuff is hard to see over the board because, you know, like if you don't have this move at the end, then white may just have a strong attack, even if he's down a little bit in material. What else? After rook g5, h6, white can try taking this, knight g5, and then just defensive move rook e7 to kill the pin, and white does not have sufficient attack according to the computer. But again, these things are very hard to assess in your mind's eye. Zapata went a different way. He played knight f4, which also looked very plausible. Then came queen g4, and now he should have just taken the bishop on d3. Of course, white has queen g5, strong threat to take on g7, so black is advised to give his queen with queen e5. And then white could take it. Black can take this way to keep f6 defended. Queen goes back at knight g6. And black is doing all right in this position. John might have enjoyed playing it anyway. He has attacking chances, but at least the material is fairly balanced. Instead, knight g6, and now boom, rook takes f7, and that's a very strong move. Okay, it's not surprising you can't take it. Knight g5 check. Again, the hanging rook hurts. If the king goes back to f8, white can remove the pawn on h7, and now the knight at g6 drops, and everything falls apart. So if the rook takes f7, black has to leave it there, but it's still not over because he can play queen d8, and surprisingly, it's not so easy for white because there's lots of his pieces hanging. Black has ideas of knight e5, and a lot of white pieces hang. So we could have queen h5. I mean, the rook still can't be taken. There's also knight d6 check now. It's knight e5, knight g5, h6. And this is also a long line, which is not so obvious. Bishop g4 is a great Zwischenzug. Queen h4 takes. And then we could see a lot of liquidation. All right, black up a piece, but not so simple. h3, bishop goes away, and g4. Now we have a very interesting position where the black is basically frozen. The knight is pinned, and he can't get out of the pin. All he can do is kind of, he can move his rook back and forth, or he can move his bishop around. But I don't think that white is really able to take advantage of the pin to get a winning position. Also, even if he gets the knight, then it could be bishop opposite colors problems. So this looks like a draw. Okay, so that was black's best possibility if he finds all those moves. But instead, very likely may be running short of time. He plays knight e5, and white has this killer desperado. Queen takes g6, and of course it's hanging to a lot of pieces, and the rook is also on f7 is also hanging in a lot of ways, but black just doesn't have a good way to take. So queen takes f7. If he plays knight f6 check is strong. If he doesn't take it, white will trade queens and take on e8 and win pieces. If he takes with the queen, queen takes e8 check, and queen f8, rook takes e5. White has a winning position. Okay, you can take the rook. Black is actually technically up a little bit of material, but his king is going to get hammered with bishop d4 coming, and there's really no hope for defense. So queen takes g6 is a winning move. He took the queen, but the problem for black is he can't take on d3 because of knight f6 check, and that's just simply going to mate. Rook takes e8 next, and it's mate. So that's a non-starter. He can't take, but now he's just behind. He tried bishop d7, and he preserved the bishop. Knight d6 comes in, and then c5, cementing that knight, providing possibilities of bishop b3 check. And Zapata just resigned after that move. c5. He could try to keep the game going with rook d7, but white could just take it. And well, now he's just 2 pawns up. Rook e6 is maybe the strongest move. Little doubt that white is going to win. So, nice game from John Michael there, and he really just overwhelmed his opponent with these blizzard of tactics. Even if there are sometimes opportunities for the defense, it's hard to play against such a relentless player. But what's really interesting about John Burke is that he's not all about the attacking play. He's just happy taking opponents down in the end game, and Anatoly Gorovets found that out the hard way. We're going to check that out next. Okay, so this one is a Caro-Kann, knight f6, and with the pawn on d4 instead of the knight on f3, white can't play the move queen e2 without sacrificing a pawn. But here, of course, he's looking for the move knight d7, knight d6, clang. John doesn't get that one. Takes. So queen d5, Gorovets says, let me trade off pieces with the kid. He plays queen h4, not yet. Not the best deal. Queen g4, okay, queen g3. You want to trade, okay, you spent all those moves to trade. Now open up the h file. d7, b3. Knight f6, bishop b2. And now I think the first new move, g6. I think h6 had been played in this position. But after g6, knight g5, okay, white is attacking that pawn. And it seems that black needs to play h6, although I suppose he would not enjoy the fact that now white can take on f6 and get kind of a classic endgame advantage, where white would have a healthy majority in the queen side and black would have double pawns and would not be able to make a pass pawn the same way. That kind of ending can be very dangerous. But the way he did it didn't work out any better, because after bishop g7, well, Burke just simply took on h7, and there was nothing to be done about it. If he plays f6, the bishop can just come out to h6, and if you try to trap it, then the knight disappears. Now it's true that black would be able to get back a piece with the rook coming to h8, but white could just take on g5, and then he's won another pawn, 2 pawns up. Yeah. So Gorovets plays knight f6, and John just wins this plays this very simply, rook h8. He knows what he has. He's got an extra pawn. He's got pawn structure. He's got two bishops, but he gives up the bishop pair because now he knows he has a fundamental win in the ending. He's going to just play with queenside majority, and he understands these kind of simple positions very well, as well as these very complicated positions. And maybe black could have defended it a little bit better. I think g5 is maybe not the best move because now this pawn comes under fire very quickly. And black's only hope is if he could somehow avoid white penetrating on the king side, and he's not able to do it. In the final position, white is about to take on f6 rather, with two passed pawns, and there's no way black can stop them. So just a very simple, fluid endgame win. It took off a pawn, traded off stuff, and won. So he's got that in his arsenal too. John Michael Burke, one of our youngest grandmasters in the United States, now at 16. He's had a little bit of a controversial time coming up because a couple of years ago, when he was working on his IM title, he made about 3 IM level performances in a row, and his rating with a rating of 2250. So the rating system was just haywire and just threw all these points at him, and his rating shot up to 2600, and he was like instantly #1 his age in the world. And it actually shook him up a little bit because he felt unworthy of that rating and just didn't think it was fair. And so it adjusted downward over time, but now he's got it going and he's working his way back up forward. So very happy result there. Meanwhile, across the pond, a Norm tournament, which found the last two players only just before starting, concluded with an historic achievement. Sam Collins earned his 3rd Grandmaster Norm and can now just about taste that title. He, on the other hand, has to get his rating up. I think he's about 25 or 30 points short after this tournament. He's got to get to 2,500, and if he does, he will be the first Irish-born Grandmaster ever. Ireland boasts one Grandmaster, Alex Barborin, who was an emigre, but it's very historic for an Irishman to actually get that Grandmaster title. So big news there. Now, this tournament we made his Norm, I've seen it listed as both the Philip Hogarty Memorial and the Irish New Year Norm Tournament, whatever you want to call it. Sam's score of 7-2 did the job, and also produced a tie for first with Grandmaster Oleg Korneev, who now represents Spain. Now, going undefeated, Sam nevertheless needed to finish with 2 wins and a draw in his last 3 to get to that Norm level. First up was veteran Irish FIDE master Colm Daly, with Sam triumphing in a surprisingly sharp battle. All right, let's check that one out. Now, this is a pretty sharp game. I think that Colm is usually more of a positional player, but I guess he felt that it might be a good idea to try to prepare a long variation, try to catch something. Catch Sam in something. So they go down the line in this Botvinnik variation. You know, Sam probably happy with a sharp game, and he certainly needs to win. But, you know, there's always a danger that, you know, your opponent plays all the theory, and then what happens? So this is a very old line. Rook b1, black knows not to take the knight. And, you know, this variation, I think, has been around, you know, maybe 30 years. And, you know, I haven't really followed it that much, but it seems like it's sort of leading into very drawish possibilities around here. 94 takes rook, check, king c7, and now I don't know. Maybe white just forgot what's supposed to happen here. He played a move that's been played in other games, but it's not very good. What white should do is bishop f4, and after king b6, probably has to play knight c4 and take a draw by perpetual. If he gets this far, knight takes f7, rook e8 is strong because now with the c pawn gone, rook e1 and queen f1 is going to lead to mating threats. White could try taking the pawn on f7 in this position, but then black, I think, can play something like queen c8 and really probably has the better chances. So this is a long line, I think, where the best white can do is a draw, but instead knight takes f7. This is an inaccurate move because rook e8, bishop f4, king b6, queen d6 check, king up, takes the knight. And it seems like this should be good for white, but the problem is there's some tactics. Bishop e4, f3, bishop c6, and, well, I think if white is going to play this, he has to play without bishop c7 check. But even so, black is still coming out ahead material. White has all his kingside pawns, but black's majority is going to go faster. Check and queen d2. All right, so he's setting up knight d6 check. But the problem is that black has this move. And now he just simply takes off the knight. And without that piece to attack, it's pretty routine for black. And Sam wins this pretty routinely, just using the power of his heavy pieces. He takes that for free and offers a trade of queens, and that's that. So, Colin Daly goes down the line, this theoretical line. He tries something new and doesn't work. So Sam gets that win, but still a lot more work to be done, as he needed to beat at least one more grandmaster, and he got it in the 8th round with a win over Ukrainian Mikhail Simantsov. Okay, so this one is going to be a Ruy Lopez, or Spanish. And it's a close Ruy Lopez, not a Marshall, but still it is one of these sort of newfangled lines. Okay, Sam dances with a possible draw, but he still needs to win another game, so he decides to go for it here. Maybe he just likes to avoid time pressure. And so this is this sort of newfangled line, which has become popular in the last few years, but somewhat risky because it normally in this opening, black tries to hold that point on e5. All right, rook b1. This gets the b pawn unpinned, so that after d5, now when the knight comes to c4, the b pawn is not attacked, and white can also push it forward if he wants to. So he kicks away that knight. The knight goes to c8, not very happy there, but he needs to leave a retreat square for the knight on d7. So now, for the knight e5 to go to d7. So now he goes forward, g4, rook f1, and he's getting ready to play f5. Now in this position, the a5 pawn is hanging. Black can take it. I think white just goes ahead with f5. The thing is that there's too much happening for that pawn on a5 to really matter right now. White generating a lot of attack. So it's really a lot more useful to use the tempo rather than take a pawn, which puts the queen out of play, probably essentially loses 2 tempi. He instead activates a knight. That really gives him a better chance. And it's really something to learn about attack and defense, that when you have some time to try to fight against an attack, usually best to use it to counterattack than maybe to grab a pawn. It's going to lose a lot of time. So anyway, Sam starts powering ahead. Probably bishop f8 was stronger, of course. Then white has the possibility of playing knight h6 check and winning the bishop and potentially mating. And maybe it does mate and the computer just doesn't see it. It certainly looks scary. But bishop h8 is also scary. And Sam finds this nice move, knight f5. Now, it's not really surprising that it would not work for black to take, but if he takes, rook takes f5, Knight takes f6 because white is just queen d2 is one threat. Knight takes f6, bishop g5, knight c3. There are various ways white can play, but basically white's going to crash through on the f-file here. All right, not surprising. Looks kind of suicidal to take on f5, so plays knight e5. And now, knight e7 check, I think, wasn't really the best way to go. He cashes in, wins the exchange, but I think that Sam should have kept up the pressure. Of course, it's very easy to say when you have a computer. Knight check, king f8, bishop f4. Just trying to break down that king side. We could see knight c3. Okay, white can give this exchange. He's got a lot of attack. He's just, bound in here with his bishop on h8, stuck. Black's pieces are smothered, and his king is in a lot of trouble. Idea bishop h6, bishop g7. So, for instance, queen c7, bishop check, and bishop g7, threatening mate in one with knight h6. And if black takes, white takes back. Queen comes into h6, knight comes into f6. Ruinous. In this position, if black tries king g8, there's knight h6, king f8, knight f5. And you can't take that, bishop h6, queen g5. So white is going to come through the middle of the board. And this would be kind of a nice way to do it. You can take on f7 and then go e5. The rook takes f6 happens. Okay, that looks like maybe it's not that devastating. But then there's going to be a sacrifice on g6 and a mate's going to come soon. And black is completely helpless to do anything about this. So it's, it's not that it's easy to see all that stuff. It's a little bit having kind of faith in your initiative. But anyway, Sam cashed in with knight f6. And he plays he plays check and bishop b2, and this works like a charm. But paradoxically, it's the wrong way to attack the knight. It defends against knight c3, but white is actually much better off not defending against knight c3 by playing bishop f4 and maintaining that attack. Black probably has to play f6 to defend against the threat of bishop takes e5, but then white is maintaining a good initiative. After bishop b2, it would not be so clear if black played knight c3. I really don't know why he didn't do that. It's very important to get rid of that bishop and preserve the knight on e5. And white could sack back the exchange if he wanted to. He could play, for instance, queen d2, and black doesn't necessarily have to take it. I think bishop g7 is a playable move here, but it might be playable also to take and then play maybe bishop f6, and I think black has some chances to defend this. But he didn't play knight c3, he played bishop g7 right away. Curious, because that allows bishop e5. And now white's attack is very strong. And there's really just no defense against it. He could have played bishop g7. He's ending up trading these bishops anyway. Sam is not in a hurry. And he gets the rooks positioned. Really white up material, and the bishop on b7 also very poor. Rook c8. I even wonder if that's an error in notation. Maybe it was bishop c8, but in any case, queen f6 is the last move, and black resigns. So nice win for Sam Collins, and that put him in position. He just needed to draw the last round against Scottish Grandmaster Matthew Turner, and he held that one pretty easily. So the celebration was on in the Emerald Isle. Sam may be better known to Icy Sears as a chess author. He's written a number of books, mostly in the openings. But congratulations to him on his fine playing achievement, and best of luck getting over that obstacle of the big 2500. So lots of grandmaster performances, big beginning of historic titles, 16-year-old American, and the first ever Irish-born player. Provided he gets that rating, I'm sure he'll get it eventually. Just needs to get over 2,500 at any moment, and he gets the title. So there you have it. Does it for this week. Look for me on my live Tata Steel recap on Thursday. I'll have the lowdown on rounds 9, 10, and 11. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and please join me next time on GM Joel's Chess Week Recap on ICC.